Before I tell you all about the Pearl Study, the families that are involved in the Pearl Study, and the work that's been happening behind the scenes, I need to tell you all where my heart has been this morning, and honestly, with the whole process of consulting on these cases. Today and this morning, I prayed over the individuals from the study, the ones I've been working with and the ones I haven't met yet. I prayed over their mothers. I prayed over their names, their stories, their bodies, their unanswered questions, and every report that has been placed in my hands. As I prayed, I kept thinking about a scene from The Chosen. I want to be very clear, this particular conversation is not recorded in the Bible. It is a scene written for the show, but it has stayed with me because it reflects a conversation that I've had with Jesus on my own with this own experience. In this scene, little James is being sent out to heal people and help other people. And he looks at Jesus and essentially asks him, "How am I being sent out to heal others when you have not yet healed me?" And the answer that Jesus gives does not tell James that he lacks faith. He doesn't tell him that he has been forgotten. The meaning of the response is that there are many people who can testify of God's goodness when he has healed you. But think about the kind of testimony that is carried by someone who has not yet received physical healing they prayed for and still believes, still decides to serve, and still helps bring healing to other people. That scene, something in it just touched me so deeply because I truly feel that. I know what it feels like to pray while my own body remains injured. I know how it feels to have organs removed before they had the full picture of what was happening inside my body. I know what it feels like to live with consequences that cannot simply be undone. I know what it's like to ask Jesus, why did this happen? Why am I not healed? Why was I not protected from it? Why am I not completely restored? But perhaps my purpose was never dependent on my physical healing and my body being physically restored in the first place. Perhaps the very things I've lived through are part of why I cannot look away when I see another person's body being misunderstood. Perhaps having my own body reduced to diagnoses, procedures, medications, and separate organ systems is why I refuse to let that happen to these children and individuals without asking deeper questions. Maybe my testimony won't only be that God heals me. Maybe it will also be that God produces through me while I'm waiting for parts of that healing to occur. That idea is not foreign to Scripture. Paul pleaded with the Lord to remove what he called a thorn in his flesh. And the Lord answered, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And there have been so many times where I find that to be so true. Scripture also tells us that Jesus sent his disciples out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. I do not believe that I am the source of healing. I believe Jesus Christ is. I believe he can work through physicians, researchers, nutrition, herbs, therapists, practitioners, parents, prayer, and people who are willing to stop, listen, and serve. I also believe that we have lost the most important part of healing when we separate knowledge from compassion and the body from the spirit and the research from responsibility to the people whose lives produce that research for that institution. This is where the real story of the Pearl Study begins for me. I did not become involved with these families as an outsider looking for a project. I am one of the mothers. My son Jonah was a part of the Pearl Study. Our children were studied. Information was collected. Testing was performed. Families gave their time, their trust, and access to deeply sensitive information about our children, thinking that there would be help that comes out of the information that was gained that would help our children. We understood that there was supposed to be more to the Pearl Study. We believed there was going to be another phase in which the information gathered could begin to translate into support for the individuals in the study. Then funding was cut and there was no extra phase. From the family's perspectives, that meant the research moved forward, but our children did not necessarily move forward with it. Parents were left without meaningful guidance, without continued support, and in some cases, left without access to genetic material and other testing without real explanation of the information that had been collected on their children. I then learned through my physician that the findings that were collected during the study on our children were being discussed in professional settings while some parents were still trying to obtain and understand what had been found in the study about their own children. And they were going to conferences and speaking on what they had found in the Pearl study without really allowing the parents to understand what they were seeing and how we could start really supporting our children based off of those findings. When my physician had told me about this situation, she had said she looked at one of the practitioners and was like, yes, this information is great, but do you know what happened to the individuals from the study? They were left without answers. They were left without some of their data. They didn't know how to help their children after, and they were left. So data was collected, but they forgot who gave them that data and who it should be benefiting. Now, with me saying all of that, it does not mean that I do not feel like there was valuable information that came from the research. It means the value did not fully make it back to the people who carried the burden of participating in the study and giving their biological materials to the research study. When I finally started going through Jonah's information, I did not see a simple answer. I saw multiple layers. I saw genetic variations, laboratory findings, symptoms, medication history, environmental pressures, nutrition, digestion, immune regulation, nervous system signaling, and years of changes that had never been placed beside one another as all parts of the same story. It took me around a year to feel like I fully started to begin to understand the information at a level I felt he deserved. When I started looking at Jonah as an individual with his own genetic and biological makeup, instead of generalizing everything for a diagnosis, I realized that the diagnosis did not tell me why his body was struggling. It described what people could observe from an outside perspective, from a symptomology perspective. It did not explain everything that was happening inside him biologically. That realization is why I began reaching out to other families from the study. I then contacted one of the head researchers from the study, and I offered to consult and work with the individuals from the study after funding was cut without charging them, because I could not accept that the information that was being collected and that these families might never understand what it could mean for their children. When I asked whether the children could be evaluated in this individualized way, I was given many explanations for why it could not be done and why I should not do it. And while some of those explanations may make sense inside a research or business model, they did not answer the question I was asking as a mother. What could still be done to help these individuals? That is why I began taking the information one person at a time. This is where I need people to understand what that actually involves. This is not placing genetic data into a computer, pressing a button, and producing a universal plan. It means reviewing hundreds of pages of material. It means comparing genetics with laboratory testing, symptoms, medical history, medication exposure, development, nutrition, sleep, digestion, behavior, and changes that have occurred over time. Some of the reports I write are more than 50 pages because the body is not simple, it's very complex, and in most of these individuals, multiple systems are involved. That work, it takes hours, weeks, and months. It is emotionally exhausting because I know that every number that I look at belongs to a person, and every report belongs to a parent that has already spent years searching for answers, trying to help their child. I also refuse to mix these individuals' information together. I will not take one child's genetics and assume it explains another child. I will not share their private data publicly. Their stories belong to them and their families. What I can share is the larger pattern that I have been seeing. These individuals may carry the same diagnosis and they may have some similar outward symptoms, but they do not all appear to arrive at those symptoms through the same biological route, and that matters. In one individual, the greatest pressure may involve neurotransmitter production and clearance. In another, it may begin with circadian rhythm signaling and the inability to establish restorative sleep. Someone else may show patterns involving immune regulation, histamine handling, oxidative stress, mitochondrial energy production, methylation, nutrient transportation, digestion, intestinal barrier function, hormone signaling, or the way medications are metabolized. Several people may have difficulty within the same general system, but the reason for the difficulty may still be different. One person may produce too much of a chemical signal, another may have trouble clearing it, another may lack a nutrient needed to convert it properly, another may be taking a medication that changes the pathway, another may have inflammation increasing the demand on the entire system. Those individuals should not automatically be supported in the same way simply because the outward behavior looks similar and has been put under the same diagnosis. This is why I describe my work as looking at the intersection of functional genomics, biochemistry, testing, symptoms, exposures, nutrition, medications, and the individual's lived history. Capital SNPs, also pronounced as SNPs, are single letter variations in our DNA. They are not automatic diagnoses, and they are not light switches that simply turn disease on and off. A genetic variation may influence how efficiently a protein or enzyme performs its particular job. Whether that difference becomes clinically important can depend on multiple things: nutrition, illness, infection, sleep, inflammation, medication exposure, environmental exposure, stress, age, hormone changes, and the demand being placed on that pathway. So instead of me saying that a gene has been activated, the more accurate way for me to say that is that the effects of the genetic variant may have become more clinically relevant under certain biological and environmental pressures for that specific individual. So the genetics give us questions. Testing, symptoms, history, and response to support help us understand whether those questions matter for that specific individual. A genetic report should never be treated like a verdict. It should be treated like a map showing us where to look more carefully. Now, the next statement I know is a big statement, but this is why I also believe that there will never be one universal biological cure or cause for every person diagnosed with autism. Autism is a clinical diagnosis that includes an enormously diverse group of people. A shared diagnosis within that group does not mean a shared metabolism, a shared immune pattern, a shared nervous system, or a shared response to treatment. That does not mean these individuals cannot be helped. It means help must be more precise for that individual. Now, when I say the goal is to restore function, I'm not talking about erasing who the individual with a diagnosis of autism is in their personality. I am talking about addressing pain, severe digestive distress, chronic sleep disruption, movement symptoms, nutrient deficiencies, inflammatory pressures, medication side effects, overwhelming sensory distress, self-injury, aggression caused by physical discomfort, and biological dysfunction that may be preventing that person from accessing their own abilities, such as speech. Jonah is the one person whose story I have the right to somewhat discuss in more detail because he is my child. For much of his life, Jonah had a very limited amount of functional speech. Much of his language involved echolalia, repeating what another person said, or repeating phrases without fully being able to understand a question or communicate what was happening inside his body. He struggled with aggression, regulation, gastrointestinal symptoms, perseveration, and behaviors that were often treated as if they were just simply part of autism. But I kept asking a different question. What does Jonah's body need to regulate? Today, Jonah speaks in full sentences. He communicates things we were once told that we might never hear. His aggression has decreased significantly. He is demonstrating abilities and levels of understanding that were always inside of him, but were harder for him to access when his body was overloaded. So we weren't able to see those abilities, and he wasn't able to access them. I am not presenting Jonah as proof that one plan will produce the same outcome for another person. His progress is his story. What it proves to me as his mother is that we had not reached the end and still have not reached the end of what is possible for him if we understand what has happened in the dysfunction of the communication and systems within his body at a biological individual level. The diagnosis of autism was never a complete explanation of what was going on in his body. And this is where I really need physicians, if you're watching this, to listen carefully. I am not against medicine, but I am against medication being used as a substitute for investigation. There are times when medication is necessary. There are times when it protects an individual or makes stability possible for them. But medication is entering a real biological environment. It's entering a body with its own genetics, nutrient status, metabolism, nervous system state, medication history, and ability or inability to process that substance. We cannot keep placing people with the same diagnosis on the same groups of medication without carefully monitoring how differently their bodies respond to those treatments. Some of the individuals that I have been working with are seeing twitching, jerking, restless movements, facial movements, body movements, and other movement-related symptoms that are out of their control. Certain psychiatric medications have a known risk that includes akathisia, dystonia, dyskinesia, and tardive dyskinesia. Some of those behaviors are being labeled as new autistic behavior instead of understanding how those medications may be interacting with the individual's biological terrain that you just entered that medication into. Those behaviors that start to develop when meds are introduced into the body, they deserve prompt medical evaluation and a serious medication review. Families should not stop these medications suddenly without medical guidance, but they should be heard when they report that something has changed in their child that has not been there before, and not be waved off and pushed to the side when those types of symptomologies stay long-term if they are not addressed. When a parent brings in a detailed report that I have made to them and a physician says, "I've never seen anything like this," that does not need to become a battle. It can become the beginning of a collaboration. No physician can review hundreds of pages of genetics, functional testing, developmental history, symptoms, and medication response during a 15-minute appointment or even 30-minute appointment. That is not necessarily a failure of that individual physician. It's a failure of the system that expects complex bodies to fit inside an appointment length that is designed for speed and profit. What I do feel like is unacceptable is dismissing information without reading it and simply adding another medication without understanding what is biologically going on with that individual. None of the parents that I'm working with in Indiana should ever feel afraid about asking informed questions, requesting their child's medical records, seeking a second opinion, or reporting possible side effects will place their family under suspicion. The mothers that I'm working with are not careless. They are warriors. They have lived beside these children every day. They know the differences between their child's baseline and a new symptom. They know what happened before a medication, after a medication, during an illness, after an exposure, or when sleep began to deteriorate. In some cases, the parents I'm working with are bringing more longitudinal information about their child than any single clinician has had the opportunity to review. The lived knowledge should be combined with the testing we are doing and not treated as a threat. L179 is a perfect example of why we need to understand the individual mechanism instead of focusing only on the diagnosis. It is being studied because researchers believe excessive catecholamine activity may contribute to symptoms in at least some autistic individuals. L179 reduces the production of catecholamines such as dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. But my question is not simply whether we can suppress production. My question is why the catecholamine system is being driven so hard in that individual. Is the body truly producing too much, or is it struggling to clear out what it produces? Is chronic stress, pain, inflammation, poor sleep, blood sugar, instability, medication exposure, and another biological pressure repeatedly signaling the body to make more? Can we identify and reduce those drivers? Can we support sleep, nervous system regulation, nutrition, digestion, verify deficiencies, and the enzymes responsible for metabolizing and clearing catecholamines so the body can begin regulating the pathway more effectively? Tyrosine is a good example that helps demonstrate why direction matters. Tyrosine supplies material the body uses to make catecholamines. It may support someone whose production is inadequate, but it could push someone with excessive activity or impaired clearance farther out of balance. In the same way, reducing production with L179 could push someone whose catecholamine function is already low in the wrong direction. That's the point. The answer is never easy. Most of the time, they're very complex. It can include medication, and it may sometimes include functional, nutritional, botanical, and environmental support. But the goal should be restoring regulation in that individual, not automatically pushing every person with the same diagnosis in the same biochemical direction just because they have the same diagnosis. I do believe that research studies matter. They can reveal patterns that no individual practitioner could see alone. But studies usually tell us what happened on average within a defined group. An individual person is not an average. The problem isn't research itself. The problem is when research ends with a publication, a presentation, or a commercial opportunity and never becomes meaningful information for the families who contributed the data to it. I also want to be very responsible about how I'm speaking about the questions surrounding environmental and immune responses and pressures. I will not stand here and tell you that one vaccine, one virus, one pesticide, one medication, one food, or one exposure explains every case. That would repeat the same oversimplification I'm arguing against. The purpose of collecting data in research studies should not end when the funding ends. I do believe that immune activation in certain individuals, infections, chemical exposures, nutrition, medication effects, and cumulative biological distress deserve careful investigation. I believe multi-generational health and epigenetic questions deserve legitimate research, but unanswered questions cannot be presented as proven fact that it cannot occur biologically in the body because we have not researched it. That is doing a disservice to any person who you are trying to support their body. The point I'm trying to make is not that I already know one hidden cause. The point that I'm trying to make is that we must stop pretending that there's only one acceptable question and that there's only going to be one cause and contributing impactful factor on these individuals. When we look deeply at human genetics, something becomes very clear. There is no genetically superior human being. Every person carries a unique combinations of strengths, variations, protective factors, and susceptibilities. No genetic profile creates a hierarchy of human worth. The same variation that offers an advantage in one environment may create a vulnerability in another. The same person who functions well under one set of conditions may struggle when illness, stress, exposure, sleep deprivation, or nutritional depletion changes the demands placed on the body. God did not create human DNA as a ranking system for the value of human life. These children are not failed versions of someone else. They are human beings whose body deserve to be understood and supported for who they are. This is not about the left or the right. It is not about defending one industry or attacking another. It is about whether our systems are willing to confront complexity when complexity interferes with efficiency, profit, or institutional comfort. I am a certified functional nutritional counselor, an herbalist, and a licensed esthetician. I study functional genomics and use it alongside testing, history, symptoms, nutrition, and other functional information within my scope. Even with my work in aesthetics as a holistic esthetician, I know and understand that the skin is not merely a cosmetic surface. It is part of our physical immune system. It is one of the largest organs in our body and is an essential barrier that interacts with our immune system, hormonal pathways, and nervous systems. Nothing in the body operates in isolation. I do not diagnose disease, prescribe medication, or practice medicine. My work is different. I organize information, I look for patterns, I identify questions that deserve further testing, which I can order, or medical evaluation by another provider. I use functional nutrition, herbal knowledge, and supportive wellness services to help reduce the burden being placed on the body. My goal typically is to calm some of the chaos so the body has a better opportunity to regulate and function in the manner in which it was intended to. This work began before my practice was fully established because I could not watch this injustice happen and tell these parents to wait until it was convenient for me. This part I know I'm going to get emotional on, so it's just a forewarning. Recently, one of the moms from the study and I attended a fundraiser for women in business, and she had invited me to that. This specific organization hosting the event provides free support for women who are trying to build their businesses and step into leadership in Christ. During the event, the woman leading the program asked whether anyone in the room could think of another woman who had illuminated Christ for them. Someone who had come alongside them, supported them, and demonstrated the love of Christ during the past several months. One of the mothers from the Pearl study stood up. She looked at me and said that when the question was asked, she immediately thought of me and everything I had done to support her. I started to cry uncontrollably. She did not know how badly I needed that moment. I had been feeling like a failure. I had been thinking that I was not working fast enough, reaching enough people, or doing enough for the families that are still waiting. Her words did not make me feel important. They reminded me that perhaps I had been measuring faithfulness by speed and numbers when God was showing me the significance of standing beside one person and refusing to leave her by herself. Maybe helping one mother feel seen, helping one family understand more of their child's body, or giving one person the strength to keep asking questions is not a failure. Maybe that is exactly where I was supposed to be in that moment. But this work cannot be rushed. If I rush it, I will reproduce the same generalized model that failed these individuals in the first place. If you were a part of the Pearl study and I have not reached your child yet, or you do not know who I am deeply sorry that you are still waiting. I cannot promise that I can review everyone quickly. I am one person, and each individual deserves more than a copied report or a generalized plan. But I will not forget that there are more families waiting. I will continue fighting for these individuals to receive their information and to have that information examined with the seriousness that it deserves. I'm hopeful that soon the parents will have opportunities to tell their own stories. Their voices should not be replaced by mine. I want people to hear what participation required, what happened afterward, what these families have learned, and what changes they have witnessed in their own children. My faith is not something that I can remove from this work to make other people more comfortable. Jesus Christ is the only reason I continue doing it. He is the highest authority in my life and in the decisions I make for my child. That does not mean I reject physicians or medicine. It means no institution, profession, corporation, or practitioner is above accountability, humility, informed consent, or the responsibility to protect the individual person. If someone is uncomfortable with working with a practitioner who openly declares that she believes God called her to do this work, I understand that I may not be the practitioner for that person, but I will not take his name out of the testimony when I believe he is the reason why I am still standing. Maybe I was not required to become completely healed before I could help someone else move towards healing. Maybe my faith is not proven only by what God restores in my own body. Maybe it is also proven by whether I continue to believe in restoration for others while I am still waiting. That is why I prayed over these children today. That is why I prayed over their mothers. That is why I'm going through the records one person at a time. That is why I'm asking physicians to come to the table, researchers to return value to the families who made that research possible in the first place, and institutions to stop treating parental knowledge like it is a threat. These individuals deserve so much more than just symptom suppression. They deserve careful investigation. They deserve informed medical oversight. They deserve individualized support. They deserve clinicians willing to say, I have not seen this before, but I am willing to learn. They deserve hope that is honest, responsible, and grounded in evidence and the individual's humanity. The Pearl families were not simply data points in a completed study. They are still here. They are still waiting. Their bodies are still speaking to us, and their mothers are still fighting. And their stories are only going to begin to be heard. And this is what all of what I am doing is all about, helping, trying to support these individuals. And I'm hoping soon you will hear some of the stories.